Hello, welcome everyone. So we have here today our HR events on setting priorities for 2022. Thank you for joining us. So for the first day, we had actually Roshan Thiran, founder of Leaderonomics, who brought us through the umbrella topic of setting priorities for 2022. And just yesterday, we had John Tanner, founder of Mitchell Lake Group, who spoke about e-learning, talent recruitment, and leadership trends in the post-pandemic era. Now, today is the third installment of that series. We have here Ori Gold with us, who will be talking about nurturing inclusion in the workspace. Now, thank you. Ori Gold, welcome to this show here with us today.
Hey, Adele, thanks for having me.
Hey, so Ori, just a little brief intro about him. Ori is the co-founder and CEO of Bench Media. So I was going through your profile, but I'm sure that people are curious about what you do. So Ori, go ahead and tell us your passion and your journey. How did you end up where you are right now?
Thanks. I founded Bench with my two amazing co-founders, Shai Luft and Gil Sneer, about 10 years ago. Bench, basically, what we do is we basically take away the complexity out of programmatic advertising and deliver smarter and better results. We have a unique technology. We integrate with all the platforms, including Facebook, Google, Amazon, The Trade Desk, many more. And basically what we do is we give organizations the ability to precisely measure, test, and manage their marketing activity. So that's a bit about Bench and about myself, my passions. I love people, I love data, I love business. I think I really I came to Sydney, I migrated here with my wife, who's Australian, about 10 years ago. Sorry, a bit more, 12 years ago. I found Sydney very inclusive culture and you enjoy the variety of different people that exist here in Sydney, in the metro area. We founded Bench, basically, the company based on these values of having a diverse team from many cultures, many backgrounds, different ages, different languages, different races, different genders, and it's just a pleasure to see that it's clockworking. Not always an easy thing to do. There's like anything else, there's challenges, but it's definitely an area that excites me, and being able to implement it in our own company, in our own vision, and see it succeeding. It's one of the best things that I've done in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you were talking, mixing technology and with people, that's actually a very unique combination. And actually, you are actually in a very good position to be sharing with us your experiences. We're in a new digital age now. We're more familiar with digitization after the pandemic era. But yet again, we also still have the challenges faced in the HR space. So great to have you here. Now, also being aware that you actually had done a podcast with Nicole, our host Nikesh, on the topic itself, diversity, equity, inclusion. Now, before we dive into what we're going to discuss today, maybe just share from your perspective to you personally, what does diversity or equity inclusion mean, and how is it important to you personally?
Yeah, for me, diversity is about having a range of thoughts, a range of backgrounds, range of perspectives, brought it into the company, in the workplace context, I guess. And equity is about taking the next step and making sure that everyone has the equal opportunity as opposed to being equal. So equal opportunity to grow into the full potential. And inclusion means that giving people a safe space to really bring the full self to work, to really be happy at work, to speak their mind, and to not shy away from being themselves. And the belief and research is backing that up, that if you create such an environment, you really increase long-term creativity, innovation, and productivity. And I think for me specifically, I'm myself in a minority group here in Australia. I've migrated here from Israel. So on a personal level, I felt those barriers in front of me. And I think that being in an environment that reduced those barriers allowed me to bring myself into a better of myself into work and make bigger things happen. And when we decided on cultural decisions and how we're making sure that we bring it to bench, it was very important for us to do that. And as I said before, I think research really backing up the fact that, particularly in our global economy today, focusing a lot of the cultural efforts on DE&I, when you have to sell globally, when you have to have a talent pool from global markets, from global locations, in different languages, you can really make better success for the long term. So we really believe in that, and it's something that excites us.
Yeah, exactly. Ori, so when you described diversity, I kind of picked up that you actually didn't really focus on the generic definition that we're used to, like we usually associate with race. I think that's the most common thing that people look at, race or gender, but you kind of mentioned as well characters. And I also believe that it's just not that, right? It also encompasses the personality, the working styles, the psychological area. Now, and if I've also had a listen to your podcast, right? And then let's talk about inclusion. Diversity is kind of like the mixed environment that we have, all that mixture of variabilities, right? And inclusion is actually the work making it work in the workplace. How do we make that uniqueness within the organization work? So, and then you shared your story, like probably your first encounter of the inclusion was when you were younger, in your younger years in the army, and how you transition into when you're in Australia. And you did say that you experienced that yourself, and you had to make changes. Did you? How was the difference like from where you were and then now in a big organization? And did you actually have to create that environment to make it work for yourself?
Yeah, I think throughout anyone's life journey, you experience many things, and it must impact the way you act. I can't say I found. I don't think I've created necessarily the company just culture around that just because of my sole experience. I think it's much bigger than that. I think maybe it has a part of it, but I think starting as a startup in Sydney, and Sydney is diverse.
Yeah.
And as a startup, 10 years ago when we've started, you don't have a lot of money. You don't pay big salaries. But what you do have is something else, which is purpose, an interrelationship with the first employees. And that, I think, was the real element that created our culture here. Because when we've started, we needed people, and we've got a diverse amount of people around us because Sydney is diverse.
Yeah, it's a melting pot.
Great, talented people here from different backgrounds, different genders. And when you start in a startup, in a small company, you work with people together, shoulder to shoulder. It's not so hierarchical. To date, our team is very flat. We're not acting in a hierarchical way. And I think that flatness and that diversity makes sure that beyond niceties, you don't just nice to your peers or nice to people that you manage. You actually get to know them real and their needs and their perspective. and you rely on them and they rely on you. And I think that really creates an inclusion and equity. So I think that's the essence of what made our culture. Maybe adding that, that we are very passionate about what we do. We really believe in what we do. We really want to disrupt the world, and starting with Australia and Asia. But we have big ambitions, and we think that technology can really, really change the way marketing is done. And that shared goal and shared purpose is probably one of the strongest things to create an inclusion and equity in a workplace. So diversity, I think, was existing because of where we are.
Yep.
And because I think the inclusion and the equity came from our passion of chasing that goal, of chasing our ambitions, and really believing in it, not just saying it. So yeah.
Right. So that's a very good point that you brought up, where it's more of a personal level that you actually embrace it in your DNA, your culture. And it's not just, scratching the surface, where we maybe hold, festivity events, those kind of like once-off events. I think to make it sustainable, the key word is actually sustainable. You actually have to embrace it day in and day out, even through your processes, even how you carry yourself, you lead your vision and your company's mission. With that said, I also would like to show a little bit of data on execution. So it is kind of interesting that we know that diversity inclusion is important. And based on the APEC data sheet, this is done by PwC, actually 75% of the organizations actually declared that D&I is a priority in their area. That's a huge number, right? And we all know that it's important. But I think that the gap is, how do we execute it? How do we translate to it? And there's further data saying that even though there's 75% who is committed to this as a priority, but only 5% actually have programs that is mature enough. So when we talk about maturity, there's actually 4 dimensions. I'd like to bring this up because it's really good data here. And then we know, going through number 1, what is the dimension that defines how do we assess our programs, whether our strategies are mature enough, whether you'll sustain these D&I values. So the first is understanding the facts today. So we talk about continuous data. How do we keep that sourcing of data and stay on top of it? Because, day in, day out, anything can change, right? We normally do like probably pulse surveys once a year. And anything can happen within that year, right? Look at COVID pandemic. That happened, just changed the world in just like overnight, right? Even economically and things like that. And also it talks about creating sustainability. It talks about how we build that business mission inside. So it's actually a whole framework. And I really like that, when you were just sharing your personals, your how you actually do it in Bench, right? You actually hit like probably 2 or 3 of those parts there. You have the DNA itself. So that's where you actually embed it in your business ideas, and you actually have that sustainability. So, and I was going through your website on Bench, and you have your core values. And maybe hearing from yourself, would you like to share more about your core values and the diversity inclusion part that you have over there?
Yeah, we had a few evolutions in our company, creating those values, and those we changed them through time. And we have one of our core values is grow together. And we really thought, what is it that we care about? And one of the evolutions that we had was, before we looked at values as something that is more of an individual. And part of that evolution was, how can we make the values of a company rather than just the individual, when the individual can actually understand it in the light of the group.
Yeah.
And that mindset, I think, shift was crucial, and really it came about because we did really believe in, I guess, we came to a place where we've created the shared purpose and that shared mission that you've mentioned, which is very important in any organization, and to make sure that everyone's looking at something that is greater than the individual or greater than arbitrary group, like you mentioned, race and gender. But what happened when we've implemented that is that the first instinct was to make sure that everyone is saying it in the same way. Everyone is looking at it the same way and stating it like a script. And what it created, without us knowing that, it created a challenge where exactly what's the difference between equality and equity. Everyone, if you're not saying it in the same way, then you do not belong, and that's becoming exclusive. And suddenly we reduced the power of many, the ability of creating an environment that everyone can speak up, everyone can contribute, everyone can say their opinion to increase innovation. Suddenly we've reduced it to something much more simplified. So we've evolved it, and part of it is we use the values to make sure that we clarify that growing together or keeping it real is there to, or make a difference, which is another value that we have, are there to make sure that keep it real and make a difference is values that every individual should remember that they can take and bring into the group. But grow together is a group one that ensures that we don't want everyone to say things the same. We just want to make sure that they understand the purpose and say it in their own way, and growing together and bring their individual self into that shared experience. But they don't have to say it in the same way. They don't have to look the same. I'm taking it to the next step. Or they don't have to even have the same language. They can say it in their own language and in their own culture, but still have an idea that is greater than the one. And I think that was a lot of work for us, to be honest. It wasn't easy. And we used the values as a framework to instill that in the company's DNA and help us remember that. Today, in 2 hours from now, and we're going to have a company session, which we do every week. And we open that session with giving each other kudos or shout outs. And these shout outs are usually can be linked to a particular value. So that's a way we've made sure that we don't only put it as a nice thing on the wall, but we actually saying to people, thank you, hey, to peers, to managers, to employees, thank you, kudos on what you've done. And it's really reminding me this value of keep it real, speaking up your mind and making a change, for instance. So that's a way for us to implement it into the actual environment and not just talk about it.
Right. And that, I guess, the flatness of the organization kind of helps, people can be more comfortable in sharing their thoughts or recognitions, giving that shout out on that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So, so you have that foundation, that framework, you actually embed it in your core values. And just reading out here, right? One of it is going together. You use the word embracing diverse perspectives. You also talked about core values of keeping it real, speaking openly with honesty, and respecting others, right? So you shared that one of the ways that you actually put it into action is having these weekly sharings where you can actually appreciate and shout out to each other, embrace that equity part, including people, make them feel belong. Maybe could you share with us like what can management or HRs do, or anything else that you try to do? You mentioned you had a lot of challenges that you try to do in Bench itself.
Yeah, I look. It comes down to many ways. One is down to tools, giving people the ability to have places to articulate what they have to say, and not get stuck because of technical issues. So having a messaging app like Slack that is properly implemented and making sure that everyone knows how to use it. Sometimes it comes down to that, to the basics. Having everyone really have access to video conferencing, so they can really freely speak to other people in other locations easily. They know how to use it. They don't get stuck when they come to that. So that's part of the tool. Another set of tools that we've created is, for instance, in our own proprietary technology. So in our bench platform, a big part of what we've created and developed is tools for teams to be able to see the right information at the right time and be able to collaborate with other peers or other teams or other individuals, it doesn't matter where they are, effectively. So what you do here with tools, you implement mobility. You implement the ability for employees to not get stuck and give up. So you lower all barriers and hardship for them to make sure that they have equipped with the knowledge to speak what they have to say and not have any barrier to shy away from it. Because if it's something that is already hard for someone, putting more barriers, get them sometimes go into the shell. So that's very important, and it's part of the ethos also of, as I said, also of our Bench Connect or our technology. Making sure that in the global economy of today, tools from different locations, different languages, different cultures can effectively communicate and produce fantastic work and innovate together. So that's one thing around tools. Another set of, I guess, practices that we found very, very useful and very effective is training and coaching. So training both the individuals and employees as well as managers on how to make sure that people feel a safe and an open environment to speak their mind. So training comes down to theory for managers and employees to really know different ways. There's no right or wrong. It's an art more than a science, and a science together with an art, if you'd like. Best practices, different methodologies, different ways to do it. So each one, not one way, so each one can choose what they're comfortable with, but do it. How for managers to see other people run meetings, to see other how meetings can be run in different ways that make sure that all participants are included. For individuals to be coached as opposed to training, for instance, that including managers and employees, having more one-on-one sessions with somebody that is got no interest in the game usually, or have only their benefit as an interest. So creating them a safe environment.
Absolutely.
And that coaching, focusing on now, what they can do now to improve their skill set and speak up their mind. So these are a few things we've implemented, and I'll give an example in a meeting. One way to get the quiet people or the introvert people to speak their mind. And a lot of time they quiet an introvert because they quiet an introvert, and that's okay. It's got nothing to do with the merit or skill set or how good they can be in what they do. It's just an attribute. And a lot of time it's because of language. We have a team in different locations. For instance, a team in Russia, which we include in our conversation. And it's very hard at the beginning when you have a room full of English speakers, and you have English as second language, and you don't feel confident enough to speak up. Then that's a barrier that you want to lower. So one way of doing it is creating an agenda which is clear for them to speak, and giving them heads up and equip them with what to speak, what we're going to speak about, so they can prepare themselves. And when they do, just let them be, and then continue from there. So that builds a lot of confidence, and a lot of time it just sits with confidence and knowledge, with, again, training and coaching, and hands-on experience. One of the best ways to implement to get it going. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ori, it just struck me when you're just sharing that number 2, especially, that you found this to be one of the very effective ways, was actually having those interventions or activities involving about managers, because again, managers, they have the direct impact on staff, right? And I also like to just share a little bit of some visuals on data here, which is about how in the region, in APAC, how most organizations, or how we actually execute programs. So it's just more for awareness that I'm sharing here, right? More programs actually carry out, things like education awareness about non-discrimination, compliance, embracing difference. But there's actually less focus on what you just mentioned, right? How do we equip, our people? How do we manage diverse populations? Or how do we embed inclusive behaviors? And I think that's probably the key. How do we hack inclusion? Is probably putting in more targeted, more interventional, more targeted intentions and activities that we do. And it's just wonderful to hear you sharing your experience on how you do it. How you actually have a different location in Russia. You shared about different backgrounds, having different second language, and yeah, that's just really amazing to hear it from yourself that you're actually doing it. And that kind of leads to my second question. My next question was, during the pandemic, when we kind of shifted into that hybrid workspace or remote working, was it easy for Bench itself to do it? Were you already having that remote working? What was the impact like when that happened?
Yeah. We've transitioned very quickly, so we are very equipped to do that. It was just natural for us. Because of some of the reason I've said before. We were set up with the right tools and environment.
Yeah.
And most of our teams are working already working in the cloud, and also we have our own technology that we've developed, so it's part of our DNA. And again, the whole concept behind that is to future-proof marketing activities and marketing teams. We looked, when we're developing our technology, we always looked into the far future and said, how will the next generation of marketing team will look like? And when they buy digital advertising, and then they need to manage their workflow, when they need to pull reports and analytics, 5 years from now, how will we look like? And we a lot of investing in R&D and in our technology to do that. So for us, doing that, it was just natural for us to move into, I guess, full remote working. To date, we are still mostly remote. We just finished a lockdown in Sydney, and again, the transition was fairly easy. At the same time, we are probably going to go back to a hybrid working, because we do see the benefit of both worlds, of meeting people and seeing them and collaborating together in a physical same location. So to answer your question, the move was very, very easy for us, mainly thanks to our Bench Connect technology. Our team were well versed and easily could collaborate with each other.
Yeah, I guess being a tech company, tech-related company, you already have that awareness, or you've already started implementing softwares and tools to keep everyone connected and up to date. Now, I have a question from one of the listeners on the floor, which is Aaron. So on the same topic as well, due to the pandemic, and many companies are now retaining remote working, probably 100% more than previously. How can management or HR create a safe space for that kind of like transparent communication? Maybe just a little bit deeper, or if you can expound on that.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. I think again it goes back to tools, making sure that everyone's equipped with the right tools to be able to participate in the conversation. That's very important. When people are remote, and sometimes some people have tendency to feel isolated. So I think that's a crucial element, and it's a responsibilities of HR, peers, and managers to make sure to reach out more frequently and more consistently. You somehow need to replace the water cooler or the coffee machine conversation, as they call it. When you're in a shared office, you go to the bathroom, you go to the kitchen, you go to the coffee machine or the water cooler, and you meet people from different teams, and you have a chit chat. Many believe, and I'm with them, that these interactions are as crucial as the official interactions for culture and innovation. That's where information is shared, a bit of gossip about people in a good way, not in a bad way, but talking about gossip in a positive way is looking at people making connections about the individuals, about their relationship, about the peers. So we have to, in the remote environment, find ways to replace that. So sometimes making non-official meetings or check-ins, it's very hard to do without having meetings without purpose or an agenda. But sometimes you can just do it to say, hey, I want to connect, I want to check in, I just want to chat. And sometimes you can have an agenda which is very loose and very non-official. But what you want to create, I think, is a few times a week, every individual is interacting with the manager and other individuals to make sure that there's a continuation of communication and conversation. Otherwise, there's a risk that you lose many people into their own shell. And that breaks the human network and human interaction that we as people, I think, need.
Right. So I have I mean, this is personally what I'm wondering. You talked about a lot, you touched on management quite a bit. And, it's backed by data saying that it makes a bigger difference when it's actually something that's championed by leadership management team. But we commonly see as well in organizations where these initiatives are kind of like delegated to people who do not have authority, and kind of in a way like, I am empowering you to do it, you can do it, and influence the organization, right? But what's your take on that, really, between these two separate stakeholders in driving that execution?
So in driving the execution of D&I in the organization, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we spoke about it in the past, and it's an ongoing long-term process. It's not a set and forget procedures that you need to tick into the HR box, which is also important. Don't get me wrong. There's many aspects, because it's a long-term and a complex commitment. When you have something like that, one of the main things that you need is it's commitment and actual belief of the leadership. Now, that's not something that you can create in one interaction, and it's something that is not also set and forget. You need to keep on evolving and recommit and change. But because it's such an important matter, and because in some organizations and teams is a mindset shift. It's something that, if you've done something for many years, like sticking to particular groups of culture or gender or age, if you like it or not, it's very hard to change it. Even if you really want to change it, it's really hard to change it. It's a bit like going to the gym, right? You really want to do it, you even pay good money, and then if you're not making sure that you keep on doing it, you might drop it off. So it has to be a part of discipline, and leadership is where it starts, and I believe where it ends. Not the only thing, but leadership is responsible for the culture, is responsible for everything in the organization. And if you have commitment in the leadership and you reinforce that commitment with training, with conversations, with asking in the leadership level, what did it mean for us? Why are we doing it? Is it still right the way we do it? Then everything else follows, including empowering individuals in the teams, which is a fantastic way of doing it. Even if they don't have authority, hey, we're in the 21st century. Authority is not the only thing that matters. Skills, interpersonal relationship, success, real difference matters just as rank and hierarchy. That is also important, but it has to come from the head. It has to come from the leadership, and the leadership needs to be within agreement that this is an ongoing and important matter that we invest in: energy, time, supervision, processes, and conversations.
You're absolutely right. So it's kind of like having leadership, and you have your structure, your tools, and then you have the processes, everything together, working together to make it work.
Absolutely.
Right. So, so here we are right now, 2021. How, and you did in the beginning, you said that this is part of something bigger, not probably a personal thing, why you're advocating for DEI, but part of a bigger picture, right? And so how do you envision things will be like for the region itself, maybe in the 5-10 years, if we get DEI right? How would that look like, in economic terms or technology terms?
Yeah, I think the region is very diverse, and the APAC region is very diverse, and I love it. It's great. So I guess different countries will have different ways, but I think that in Australia, for instance, I think Australia is very progressive, but there's still a long way to go. I think that in the part of the South Asian countries, it's still a lot. There's a lot of still, I guess, segregation between different groups. But I think that is changing very, very fast. So if we're looking 5 years into the future, I envision many more groups collaborating together, more online, more remote. I think groups from different countries and locations working on the same thing very effectively and selling to other markets by mostly collaborating through technology and tools such as our technology or other technologies that are out there that allow really quick collaboration between different teams, allowing you to connect to other systems very quickly, allowing each individual to get the right information at the right time and effectively pass it on to the next person that might be in a different location, speaks different language, in the right way, so they can take on and carry the job. And I do think that it's going to just increase that global economy. And I'm excited about that. I think that shared market of one world is where we're heading, and I love it. I think it's an exciting time that we live in.
I'm equally excited as well. Just some questions here to flash from the audience. We're going to go through a little bit of Q&A. So we have a question here, Ori, to you. Do you think it's harder for people who have not worked abroad? Probably they are part of a minority that be part of an organization to understand or be aware of the lack of inclusion in their midst. Like, what do you think about that?
I think it's a good point. I do think so. I think that people that didn't necessarily experience that comprehend it in a different way, but that doesn't mean they can't understand it. I think there's a way, and there again we're going into education and coaching. First of all, educating people who never necessarily had the experience about the experience, that's where it starts. Making sure that when they do have experiences with other cultural background, races, languages. I think yes, it is harder for them to understand, but I think it's harder doesn't mean that can't be done. And there's ways to do it, like creating working group, which outside of the normal peers, outside of the normal maybe ages or races or gender, whatever it is in the organization that we want to tackle. But if we're talking about cultural diversity, then mashing people with a shared goal and a shared outcome, and making sure that they have to collaborate and have to work together. There's nothing like that to bring collaboration and empathy to the other when you're reliant on other people from other backgrounds to get something that is bigger than all of you. Is something that always work. And I think I think maybe again, I don't like the change between us and them, the minority versus the majority, because it's also creating two different groups. I think the world is ready for change of that. And, if as a minority group, we keep on feeding the same language, we just feeding the same separation, we're feeding the same exclusivity. You have to practice what you pitch. And you have to act in that way and behave in that way. And then usually when you do it and you do it with confidence because you really believe in it, things follow. I truly believe in that. And I think that's the way to go. So yes, different experiences, but it has a place because it's all about having different experiences into the workplace.
All right. Thank you for that. That was quite eye-opening. Ori, so next to the next question from Divya. So if you could share with us, what are some practical methods that we can do to track whether we are moving the needle on our programs towards the DEI effort, especially when it requires collaboration with management team?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's some different practices that one can do in order to make sure that they move the needle. One is to ask people. It's the easiest and effective way, particularly those people in the team that you feel might feeling excluded or might feeling a bit not equipped or shying away from conversation, is to just ask them on an ongoing basis how you feel. And then in order to make sure that you move, that's on the micro level, but which is important. On the macro level, aggregating that into data sets and quantifying it a bit. So quantifying the quality data is important, and start seeing trends. As maybe particular groups do feel compromised. And if you really believe in DE&I, then that's your next challenge to tackle. So, we've noticed that this group feel compromised or this group can't speak up. Why is it happening? Usually that combination of open communication. Look at an organization today that doesn't have feedback loop and communication integrated into its core, into its everyday, into its leadership, just not going to survive, I think. So it's all about that, and systematically doing it. It means that you have a lot of time the people and culture team or the HR team championing it, making sure that it's happening, prompting people gently to make sure that they keep doing it. And if they don't and they feel that something is off, making sure that managers and leaders getting the same coaching and training as the employees. It's something that everyone needs to be doing. And I think that makes the best way to move the needle. Tracking it is, again, you can track it by surveys. When you have one-on-one communication, just give it a bit of a score. How do you feel? Are you happy? Do you feel that you can speak your mind? That's one way of tracking it. And another way of tracking it is through time, seeing that people, I guess, you can start understanding that there's a connection between those quantifiable data, to the performance of the teams. We've done a research with Macquarie University recently, trying to connect the characteristics and the attributes of diverse teams and see how it influences the performance of the team. And in many of the scores, it was clearly that we outperforming the benchmark, and we can attribute it to the teams. And some of the findings were a challenging one, that we've suddenly realized that there's certain things that we don't do good enough, and that gives us a below a performance than what we want to, or the benchmark, and that created the next set of things that we want to tackle. So that's another way of tracking it, through real studies by the organization itself, or combining it with external organization like HR teams, or different technologies that allow you to do that.
Right. Wow, I'm just really impressed that you're so committed that you actually did like a study on that. And absolutely right, like data is so important, right? You can be doing, you can have wonderful plans, strategies, but how do we know what we're doing is right? And at the end of the day, data actually helps put it into a rational idea. It's not just a gut feel, or I feel we're doing it right or wrong. But data actually helps put things in a clearer picture, makes it more objective, and kind of like points you to the areas that you need to focus. Wow. And I do believe, this is just something personal as well. I do believe that, we're having more innovation in the tech space, and we have softwares and tools like that. We're probably in that era that, in order to move forward, we need to combine a little bit of technology in what we do. Similarly, in what you're doing in digital marketing, you're doing programmatic advertising. The traditional way will be meeting probably the client, the person who's putting up the space for advertising. If that's just going to be individual without the software, without the algorithm, can you imagine the time and effort that you need to go? But with what you guys are doing, you have the algorithm built in. It's just a click away, and everything's kind of like pop, 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 pop. And the client can just put it up automatically. It's like just all through automation, right? And that it makes things faster, easier, and at the end of the day, you get a better ROI. So I think moving forward, that's probably the future. We need to start incorporating like technology into what we do. And that's probably the future of probably HR or management leadership in that sense. Right. So maybe another question more next is from Irvin. So he's asking about, personalized one-to-one discussions between managers. As you shared, it's actually indeed one of the best ways to learn about each other. But, just sometimes people may not be comfortable, sharing their minds and thoughts. So what do you think managers should do to help them overcome that barrier?
First of all, I think it's a very important topic. So if someone, I think that one way to do it is really get coaching and training for the managers themselves to create that environment. We find that a responsibility of the manager to create that environment as a safe space. But to your point, Ivan, we do not assume that it happens. So we assume that in some cases or many cases, it actually won't exist. One way to do it is to that we've done in our companies, make sure that at least there's the people and culture or HR team is really for the people and really has an open door. So if someone is hesitant to talk to the manager, because it can be intimidating, particularly for younger, less senior employees, but to anyone, basically, it can happen, to be able to go to a different place and say that. It's a bit, I'm not going to be too controversial here, but a bit like going to the priest, saying you have a place that you can really put out there whatever you feel, and it's a safe space for you to do so. And to know that you can do it and that they will, as a people and culture HR team, will keep your interest and want to reveal everything. So asking for a consent in any stage of the process is very, very important, because then people explicitly are knowing what's happening with what they're exposing. And that's happening from the HR side, but that's one of the practices that a manager can do in explicitly creating a safe environment, like saying, look, whatever you tell me, I won't pass on, etc., etc. So creating a third party, like people and culture team or another team, is one way of doing it. But making sure that we keep on evolving the managers and the leaders to have a real open door policy, a real open space and safe space for everyone to say and speak what's on their mind, and to not compromise that. I think these are probably the easiest way to do so. One another way that we've implemented recently is actually a feedback. So peer-to-peer feedback, managers feedback, employees, people that are under you feedback. And make sure that feedback is known for the person who requests it. It's a process that is gathered, but it's known. Nobody's doing it behind your back, because you can't compromise trust. And make sure that process is anonymized. If people and constructive. So what you do is you allow people to really speak their mind without being punished for it. And then so the anonymity is a tool to make sure that people are not punished for it. But that process needs to be really well filtered, so it can be managed in a positive way, not in a political or toxic way, and in a constructive way, but still in a way that gives the right feedback for the right person, or people can give each other feedback in that way. So there's another tool that we've implemented that works great. Ever since we've implemented that, most people ask for it. Everyone wants to know how they are. Everyone wants to be aware, but many people are maybe afraid of doing so, and taking away the barrier of fear, creating a trusted environment that one can speak their mind without getting punished. But you do it a few times, suddenly the gates are open, and I really believe in that. So there's a few tools there.
Right. I really resonate what you say as well, because personally, we do, that's what we do here as well in Leaderonomics Digital Lab. Having those kind of software tools really help, because creating that platform to enable that communication, to have that transparency. Sometimes it's really awkward, like even going to that person, you have to approach the person individually. Even your best bet, sometimes there are still barriers because you see that face to face, but sometimes tools just kind of like remove that barrier if it's something that happens on a very frequent basis, you're expecting it, it kind of brings down the barrier, and you're used to it because it's a habit, it's a trend. For example, sharing your feedback, what we do is a daily pulse check-in with an app. You feedback to your manager, and then as that kind of builds a habit, builds that foundation over time, that allows people to break that barrier down. And keeping it anonymous, that's also very important sometimes. Whenever you want to highlight an issue, that really helps, like having like external or third party, keeping it as neutral and as unbiased as it possibly can, so that it gets heard and actually get worked on, acted. Maybe just to wrap things up, we just have a few minutes left now, or just maybe if you could highlight just maybe one or two things that we can take home as a HR or the management team. How do we nurture inclusion in our organizations?
Again, open communication, making sure that we keep on asking each other, leadership, managers, individuals, similar to what you mentioned in the Pulse surveys, doing it frequent, often, small and frequent, drip engagement as we call it, to make sure that we are always listening to one another. We are always hearing where people are at, and then we're tackling it straight away, which is a very important matter. We used to have a lot of issues in our own company where feedback was received. We meant really well. We've done meetings on it, but then problems of implementing it fast enough, then people say, oh, I'm giving feedback, and it doesn't happen. So I think being conscious of the pace, making sure that when feedback is received, it's well communicated and well implemented. In our organization, people and culture team, led by my business partner, Shai Luft, overseen by him, led by our people and culture director, Anthony Ferget, by our people and culture manager, Nicole, really implemented the process that once you get the feedback, straight away it's being communicated and straight away being transparently implemented. And if there's any hardships, also communicate them straight away. And I think there's nothing like that, setting the example from the people and culture team for everyone to follow. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Ori. It was a pleasure speaking to you. I'm really honored. I mean, Bench is actually one of Deloitte's Technology Fast 50 Award winner in 2017. Thank you for sharing your insights. I'm really impressed with what you shared. I can really see that you embed that whole DEI in your organization. And hopefully we'll be able to share more sessions in the future with you, Ori.
Adele, was really fun. Thanks for having me, and I'm sure we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So, guys, that is the 3rd installment of our HR events covering setting priorities for 2022. Now, if you'd like to listen more about what we have been talking about in the past 2 days, check out our LinkedIn on Nicole page. We had Roshan from our founder of Leaderonomics talking about setting priorities. We also had John Tanner from Mitchell Lake Group sharing about digital learning, talent recruitment, and leadership trends in the post-pandemic era. Now, the next session will be on redesigning a safer space for women. So it is kind of a bit of a lead up to this inclusion as well. We talk about women here. That will be coming up on 26 November in our Tech Talk Friday. So do check that out as well. Right. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions or you'd like to talk more about what we just discussed, do drop us any contact on our email at learn@leaderonomics.com, or you can get in touch with us on LinkedIn on Nicole page as well. And that's it. And I'll leave you with a short video of what we do here, and hope you have a great afternoon ahead of you. Thank you.